And so it is, beloved masters. The perspective that the world society has had is that fear is a weakness, a form of limitation. And certainly it can be. Fear was brought to humanity by the ego, which was indeed a gift of God, when soul was not accustomed to having a body. And the ego was about creating a warning system that would make people aware so that they would not destroy the body before the journey was over. But fear in and of itself is indeed a warning device. It is an indication of caution. But as with many things in the game of illusion, as things have gotten further and further away from at-one-ment, it is that fear has become a paralyzing, immobilizing consciousness. It can literally stop everything in the life. And very often it even stops the heart. So it is to consider, really consider, what are you afraid of? And as you begin to name what you are afraid of, it ceases to be fearful. It really ceases to be that paralyzing illusion, because when you give fear a name, then it becomes something manageable. If it's just fear, as a very wise man said, the only thing that you have to fear truly is fear itself. And so, beloved masters, fear is really not a weakness. It is allowing fear to take over your life, to be the controlling factor, to be the dominant force. And in these times where everyone is returning to reality, coming out of the game of separation and illusion, and remembering how to live real, then fear will slowly, yes, perhaps, but as you are willing, even more rapidly, fear will begin to come into a perspective in the life. So when I say, what are you afraid of? It really isn't even about thinking, trying to figure out what you are afraid of. Nearly so much, beloved masters, as it is feeling it. Feeling into yourself. And where do you feel the fear? The mind may call it money, but the truth is it's security. The mind may call it relationship, but the truth is the fear is loneliness. The mind may call it disease, but the fear may be death. And all of these things, beloved masters, every one of them, is changing dynamically. In the energy of these times, everything is changing. Consider where you have set up systems of contrary. And it is, beloved masters, these are so subtle. These are so ingrained in your patterns that discovering these systems of contrary may be very difficult in the beginning, and yet as you begin to pay attention, listening to what you say, and you may not even say it out loud. You might not want to say it in front of anyone else. You might not want anyone to know you felt that way, whatever it is. I desire to have peace and quiet. I desire to live alone. I desire to be by myself. But I want friends, and I want interaction with humanity, and I don't want to be lonely. I just want to be left alone. Getting clear about these dichotomies that have been created and feeling into the truth. I'm afraid to be alone, but I'm also afraid that people will attempt to run my life. So I'm afraid that if I have relationships, I will not be able to be myself. Go deeper. I'm not really sure who I am. And I don't want someone else telling me who I am. And yet I ask them, what do you think about me? Do you believe I should do this, or should I not? What do you think I should do about this? And then the feeling of anger, fear, resentment. Why do they think they know so much that they could tell me how to live my life? All of these fears, truly, beloved masters, stem from a refusal to be present with yourself. To be with yourself now in this moment. So the two heads of the ego are always pulling in different directions. learning to love every aspect of yourself. To love, to respect the part of you that wants to be alone. To love, to honor the part of you that desires to share, to be involved, the part that desires community, companionship. The part of you that is afraid not to be rich, and the part of you that is afraid to be rich. The part of you that wants to be in control, and the part of you that doesn't want any part of being in control. And how these conflicts, these dichotomies, upset the balance in life, and yet you have lived with them in the illusion. And now in this time, the ego is making people afraid to move, afraid to do anything, afraid to make a choice and afraid not to make a choice. And it is truly not the fear that is the weakness, but the ingrained resistance, avoidance of being clear and present with yourself. Dearly beloved, divine, amazing, creative masters. The parental order. The parent says how you must live your life. And the child rebels. You can't make me do that. You can't make me live my life like that. And so, rather than owning, dearly beloved masters, the authorship of your own life, the one who writes the script, the one who decides how that script will be played. You had a fear, an aversion to authority. Perhaps wanting to be the authority, but not wanting anyone else to attempt to have authority in your places. Perhaps you don't want any authority. I don't want any responsibility. I don't want any part of it. I just want to do what I want to do, when I want to do it, how I want to do it. And it is, beloved masters, that desire, that judgment that is based on the fear of losing one's freedom is creating chaos in the society now. Because people are wanting to assert their own personal authority. This is why the mind has had such a fear and decided that people require to be governed because people don't have any sense about governing themselves. And so there is a necessity for a governing body to tell everyone how they must live, to make the rules and to enforce them. And yet, dearly beloved masters, the people that want to make the rules are not wanting anyone else to rule them. And the people that they are attempting to rule do not want anyone telling them what to do. Aggressive, dynamic, domineering parent and rebellious, irresponsible children. And it's all about judgment and the fear of being judged. I don't want anyone to think I am not responsible. So behind closed doors, in the illusion, these people who didn't want anyone to think that they were irresponsible would be highly irresponsible, but they did it behind closed doors. And only a few were supposed to know, and they were not supposed to say anything, because after all, there they were in the same place, participating in the same irresponsibility. How are you with your judgments about the contraries of your life? Everyone desires to have money, but there are many who will, out of the other side of their mouth, make some very contradictory statement about those who have money. A very judgmental statement that comes from an idea that was planted by the lineage, the legacy, about people with money. And even people with money will make the very same judgments because rich is relative. To hear someone who makes $1 billion a year making very derogatory statements about rich people, while those who are making less than $21,000 a year, living below the poverty level, will play exactly the same game. They may not have much, but if they have more, then they will consider themselves superior. They may not have much, but if they have less, then they will make statements of inferiority. Personal perspective, personal judgment. feel the energy of what you experience as I describe these situations. As I describe reactions, responses, as I describe the judgments, feel it. Feel where it hurts you to even consider the judgments against, the judgments for. Feel where it makes you angry that these judgments would even exist. Feel where you identify with the judgment. The negative judgment that points out that you're less, or the positive judgment that gives you a sense of being more. Feel your denial that you were really judging anyone after all. I'm not that kind of a person. I wouldn't do those things. I wouldn't live like that. Honesty is an imperative in these times, and it is not, beloved masters, brutal honesty. It isn't about being cruel. It isn't about inflicting pain upon yourself or anyone else. It really is, beloved masters, about clarity, getting clear about your personal situation. The ego always wants to say, yes, but they. Let's make a comparison. Let's have a survey. Let's consider percentages. Let's compare the odds. But this is about you. You, a divine, amazing, one of a kind, creative master. How do you personally allow fear to be perceived as a weakness? The fear itself is not a weakness. But how do you personally perceive the fear as a weakness? Where have you wanted to avoid looking at your fear? Where have you used your fear as an excuse for undermotivation, a lack of accomplishment, poverty, any limit in your life? Where have you used fear as a tool to prove some limitation is valid, only to find that in the energy of these times, it's almost as though the tool of the proof of limitation becomes a weapon against your mastery. It deprives you. It limits you. So, facing the fear, which in the beginning was simply a gift that God sent in the form of the ego to keep you safe. It was actually a gift of love. And what masters in forgetfulness have done with that is pretty amazing. You've used it against yourself, you've used it against others. Using fear against others to gain control can become an addiction. And the addiction can, yes, become a weakness. But it wasn't the fear in the beginning that was the weakness. It was the outcome of the fear. So, when you see someone is afraid, it isn't about being so quick to judge that they must be weak, as it is to consider the mirror they present and what are they bringing you that you require to look at within yourself. And again, in these times, revelation, the pulling away of the veils of illusion. And who is there? Who are you? Really? How long has it been since you considered who are you? Really? And what have you attempted to put in the place of the reality based on the judgments, your fear, of a weakness, of a failure, of not being good enough? What have you put in the place of the reality of you? It's so important for you now to face every fear. It isn't about war. It's about clarity. If you miss a fear, it's not the end of the known world. The mind can get so literal that the mind can create its own fear of not being thorough enough, and then you will become paralyzed with the fear that you might have missed something. There are those who get so caught up in purging the mind, the emotions, the physical body of every imperfection, and the focus is on purging the body, of cleansing, of cleansing and cleansing and cleansing. I did a liver cleanse, and I did a kidney cleanse, and I did a bowel cleanse, and then I cleansed my whole body, and then I went on a very stringent fast, and then I cleansed myself again, until you're so clean that you can't abide on a planet that really has a lot of imbalances. You can get so emotionally, intellectually pure that you're too fragile to function. I'm too pure to associate with other people. I'm afraid to go among certain groups. I'm afraid to even sit at the table with people that eat certain foods. I don't want to be around those kinds of people because they might contaminate me. After all, I've worked very hard to get where I am. And it is, beloved masters, to be comfortable with yourself in your life, on the planet, wherever you are, to be well with yourself is far more important than getting rid of the things of the past. And again, I'm going to mention blending, spiritual homogeny, bringing everything you are and integrating it. And the mind fears that there might be so much negative in who I am that I couldn't bring up enough positive. But what I'm going to become ill, fall into something terrible, have awful things happen because I didn't have enough good in the blending to balance things. God created you. And in every aspect, every action, every condition that you have ever experienced, the fact that God created you was always the bottom line. You have had all manner of experiences. You have allowed fear to drive you in thousands of different directions. You have focused on the negatives of fear until you began to doubt that there was anything good. You may have even been born into a lineage that was so addicted to the negativity of the planet that the teachings that you gave or that you were given were really directed toward a fear of the bad things. And yes, if you focus on fear and focus on fear and focus on fear, you can be afraid to move.